Live from Miami, Florida, broadcasting around the world. You're listening to Patriots Perspective with Christi Tasker. Your news behind the government's facade. Don't fall victim to propaganda or spend another 30 days in the tech gulag. Turn off your tell-lie vision and just listen. Hear the most mind-opening hours of your life as we interview whistleblowers and real patriots for uncensored truth. The Commie News Network and Fake Book cannot control the power of Jesus Christ. Therefore, they have no power over us. There aren't enough Vegas strippers to fake check what's coming. Put in your earphones and avoid the tech tyrants. Subscribe to patriotsperspective.com now and see the evidence and action items to help you take back your God-given rights, government, and expose Satan and his demons taking up residence in your community. Be sure to hit the like or rumble button and comment to tell us where you're holding the line.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Patriots Perspective. I am Christi Tasker, and I am your propaganda destroyer, the government gangster disruptor. I mean, we just cannot even make up what's happening in this world. But today, I have one of my favorite guests back. Victor Hill is back with me. Hello, former Sheriff Victor Hill, who is also running for
United States Congress, 5th Congressional District in Georgia.
Yep.
I like that government. Was that government gangster buster? I like that.
Government gangster disruptor. I actually like paint my clothes and stuff, and a lot of times people will literally like stop me everywhere because I literally I'm like, government gangster disruptor is here. So
wow.
They listen. Either the people that love me, they're the honest ones. The other ones, they tend to run, Victor, and we know what that's like. We know what they do. And you better than anybody know
that's true.
The inside of the justice system, how it operates when you are sheriff, and how things can be stopped. So today we are going to be talking about, I specifically asked Victor to come back on. He's going to come on for a plethora of series here because there's so much to break down with you, Victor. But today I specifically want to talk about inside the jail, like what happens inside the jail. How drugs are getting in, how phones are getting in, how the system is just so broken. So, listen, there may be I'm sure there's 1,000 others that we have no clue of as the public. So take it away. Like, how does it happen where somebody goes to jail? Let's kind of start at the beginning, like the minute they arrive. Okay. So, I know at Miami-Dade County Jail, I can speak from firsthand experience. Literally, you go in and they want to do a health examination on you.
Mm-hmm.
That happened in your?
Yes. There has to be a screening, for females, make sure they're not pregnant. If so, they got to be given special care. We got to ask basic questions like, do they have any contagious diseases? Take the blood pressure, stuff like that. So there's, it's interesting when you're the sheriff. It's almost like running a daycare center, for lack of a better term, but you're responsible for everything, for health, for dental, safety, everything. Those are your babies, for lack of a better term. So if they're sick, you got to take them to the doctor. If they need surgery, you got to make that happen. So a lot of people don't understand that. They think jail is just a place, okay, you throw people or whatever happened. There's a lot of care and responsibility that comes if you're the warden. One thing I want to jump right into that I thought you brought up was interesting is about how drugs and cell phones get into the jail. Mm-hmm. So I can speak from two perspectives on this. Okay, as a sheriff, there was no drugs in my jail. There was no cell phone in jail. And people said, no, you got to be kidding. But no, actually, it was true. So how did I do this? It wasn't rocket science. Most jails, there's several ways for people to get in, meaning employees, nurses, doctors, maintenance people, whatever. I shut it down to one entrance. If you're an employee, you can only come in there. When you come in, you're searched. There's a camera filming the search, a camera that I had access to that I could get on my phone and watch and see if the searches are being done. It's being recorded. So sometimes no one knew when, a drug dog was there. And sometimes it wasn't. You just never knew. And by doing that alone, we were able to prevent contraband from coming into jail. When contraband comes into the jail, it's not an inmate problem. It's an employee problem. Drugs that don't magically float into the jail and float out. Inmates can't get it in or out without the help of an officer or some type of employee, a maintenance man, a clerk, a nurse. That's how drugs get into the jail. So anytime a warden or a sheriff has drugs in the jail, you can always punish the inmate or whatever, but you got a bigger problem. You got a corrupt employee there.
Mm-hmm. You got a corruption officer. Sheriff,
absolutely.
Corruption officer. Instead of a correction officer, you have a corruption officer.
Absolutely. I like that, corruption officer. And you know what's so interesting is for the 15 years I was sheriff, no drugs in the jail, no cell phones. Now the Clayton County jail is drug infested. People getting overdoses. You know, it's amazing. Now I'm not sheriff. A lot of people get out of jail and they contact me on Messenger or on Facebook. I had an older gentleman contact me and said, listen, I wasn't a fan of yours, but at least when I was in the jail, I could breathe. He said he had to go to medical because they were smoking some type of drug. I believe it was probably K2 or something. And he said he inhaled it and it made him sick. And he was like, this is ridiculous. You know, he said, now I see why you ran to jail the way you did. So when you look at that, there is no excuse for drugs or cell phones to be into jail. It's a leadership problem. And that means, like you said, there's a corruption officer there.
So is it true? Okay, so there's a myth out here that is it true that drones can fly over and drop contraband into the yard?
It's very true. A jail in Atlanta, in the next county, Fulton County, where the city of Atlanta sits, they're having that problem right now. Inmates will knock a whole lot of a window or burn something out. And that's another issue. How do inmates have enough time to do that unsupervised? We'll get to that in a second. And then the drone will come and fly it there. Again, and that's a huge problem. And you know, they can fly anything, not just drugs, not just cell phones. They can fly guns there. And that was a jail that actually a gun got inside of one inmate, shot another inmate. And are you ready for this? Not only did one inmate shoot another inmate over a drug deal, another inmate, I kid you not, at the Fulton County jail, this actually happened. And not only did that happen, another inmate picked up his cell phone and dialed 911 to report the shooting. This is a true story. Can't make it up, right? Oh, and that jail was considered the worst jail in Georgia. Now the jail that I used to command, which was considered the safest jail in Georgia, they're now competing to see which is the worst jail. I can tell you this, the jail that I used to command, we never had a murder under the 15 years I was sheriff. They've had, if we count yesterday, they've had 7 murders, which means more inmates have been murdered in that jail than any other county jail in Georgia now. They got the highest murder rate.
Yeah. So how did, I mean, like what ended up happening with, you know, with the jail? What happened to the people? And I mean, how could that have easily been stopped? I would think that there's a guard. Okay, so I've always thought that there was like a tower above the jail. There's like a guard kind of like watching everything. Like, I mean, is that the case or no?
It is. It will, and different jails are set up different. If you look at the jail that I was sent to with the political lawfare prosecution, that wasn't the case. It was 200 inmates thrown in an area, no cameras, nothing. The only time they knew what you were doing is if a guard walked through, if they walked through at all. So that made for some very interesting stories I can tell you later. But at the jail that I commanded, there's a central tower where a guard is sitting in the middle and he can look around and see what's going on. It's like a circular thing. Mm-hmm. And then there's supposed to be one runner there. Well, interestingly, before I became sheriff, 3 inmates escaped from that jail. And you got to ask, well, how did that happen if there's someone sitting in the guard tower? And remember this was always my philosophy. There's no such thing as an escape. And I stand by that to this day. Inmates don't escape from jails. They're let out of jail. Either intentionally or through negligence. Either someone fell asleep literally and they got away, or someone helped them out. The way the jail was designed and the way most jails are designed, it is virtually impossible for someone to escape unless someone helps them get out, or unless they just leaving the key or whatever like that. And I made no bones about it. If somebody escapes from this jail, your job is going to escape from you, because if you're doing your job, there should be no escapes.
Yep.
Same thing, same thing with accidental releases. If people are really doing their job, there shouldn't be an accidental release. So when you start accidentally releasing people from their jobs, all of a sudden that goes down. And another thing that's just as bad as accidental releases that happen in jails is, let's say a guy is supposed to get out August 1st, and now it's October, and he's still in jail because someone forgot to let him out. Right. So now he's in jail longer. That was another problem. Let me tell you how I solved that one. If a guy stayed in jail 3-4 days longer, that's huge. I mean, he could have found a job. He could have been with his family. So the amount of time that a guy stayed in jail extra, that would be the amount of time that employee would be suspended.
Oh,
because
that's good.
right.
I like
exactly.
that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's perfect. The punishment fits the crime, like in terms of, or the punishment fits whatever. And not only that, but I mean, what I saw is like and I'll call the majority of what I saw corruptions officers. There were a few that were worthy of corrections, but the majority were corruptions, or better yet, just absolutely nothing in terms of what they're doing. But they certainly didn't care about the people around them. And I was like sitting there going like, what? And you know what? One of the inmates actually said to me, she goes, you know what? They're the ones who choose to come here every day. So like they're holding us and they choose to come here every day. So just think about that. Like, because I mean, it does take,
no, keep going.
Like in other words, yeah. I mean, in other words, like, can you imagine actually working here on a daily basis? But then at the same time, I can't imagine being there and then being so unhappy that I would be like mean to people. You know what I'm saying? Like on purpose, especially people who are just coming in, you don't know them. They've never, they didn't have bad behavior in front of you, so it's like, sometimes I just couldn't believe what I was seeing in terms of, the whole system. I say, there's, as bad as it truly was, it was like, I can't even imagine, what's happening when somebody's there for long term, like as far as the power that a corrections officer would have over them, or, the jail system itself. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. Corrections is a very, very interesting scenario, because you're actually, I've heard people say this, you're actually locked up there with the inmate, for lack of a better term. They can't leave and you can't leave, at least for your shift anyway. I mean, you can leave, but it's a very interesting thing that happens there. And then sometimes Stockholm syndrome takes place as well. And probably my biggest challenge as sheriff was keeping those type of relationships from developing, because that's how, think about it, in order for an officer to bring drugs into a jail, there has to be some type of relationship with that inmate. Mm-hmm. How did that conversation even get started? Who initiated it? Was it an inmate that said, hey, look, if you bring drugs in here, I can make you a lot of money or whatever like that? Mm-hmm. And one of the hardest things was to explain that there's this delicate balance, that inmates aren't your friend. That doesn't mean you're going to be mean to them. I mean, there are a lot of people not my friends, and I see them every day and I wave and say hi, or open the door if I happen to get to the door first. But that doesn't mean we're starting a conversation and getting to know each other and coming up with a way to sell drugs, if that makes sense. Yeah. So there's a balance.
How did you prevent that? Like, I mean, what are the rules? What's supposed to happen? Because I mean, obviously, one of the things that was playing the entire time that I was there, I wish I could find the video, but it was like playing on repeat, like this 5 or 10 minute video with, believe it or not, George Bush, and about how, if you were raped in jail, that you should report it. It's like, oh my gosh. I mean, like there's, and it's like, aren't you guys, like my question was, aren't you guys like preventing that? Like, isn't that
Well, I did when I was sheriff. Now, here's the crazy part, and here's what I think you experience, that you would not experience, but you would appreciate. especially from a Patriots perspective. Okay. In order to make that jail safe, there's certain things that have to be done. And there's a group of people out there that, and they're the ones that's usually behind lawfare, prosecutors, judges, stuff like that. And they're great at telling you what you can't do and what you shouldn't do, but they're not great at coming up with an alternative of a better way to handle it. Well, I ran the jail like a military boot camp. It was probably the closest thing you could get to a Marine Corps boot camp that you can imagine. Inmates had to go to attention, sir, yes, sir, ma'am, yes, ma'am. They had to face the wall when commanders and women came through. That way it wasn't this eyeballing, it wasn't masturbating in front of women and all the other disgusting things that happen. And that put a stop to a lot of problems you see in the jail. Throwing urine and feces on officers and other people. All of that stuff came almost to a stop. And then, of course, there were other things that I did that was in training and in policy, as far as using restraints for people that show pre-attack indicators that they're potentially violent, which ultimately ended up in me being indicted and sent to prison.
Yeah,
when that never happened to anyone in the future. Exactly, because folks that showed signs of violence, that made threats, ran women off the road, tore up their mothers' houses, tore up officers' yards, made, people that we knew could be potential problems, they were restrained for observation. It was a chair. It wasn't like they were being tortured or anything. Well, suddenly political enemies said, okay, this is illegal, after a campaign worker in a campaign against me was restrained, who had been restrained several times before because he's a lunatic. Well, I say all of that to say this. Now that restraint chair has been utilized, 7 people as of yesterday have been murdered in that jail.
How many?
So 7.
7.
Yesterday,
wow.
Right, 7. There was never a murder in that jail under the 15 years of my tenure. Now, there have been natural cause deaths. I mean, people have heart attacks or whatever like that. There's no way to really control that. But there's been 7 murders at the Clayton County Jail. I can't tell you how many stabbings there have been.
That's the video you sent me yesterday. Shall we play that really quick so that they can see?
Sure. Go right ahead. And this happened after they came at me with prosecution. Right.
Okay. We may have to back it up for a second.
Sure.
You're not hearing any audio, are you?
Say it again.
You weren't hearing any audio, were you? Okay, I think the audio is on now. Here we go.
Okay.
This is Victor Hill. I'm the former sheriff of Clayton County, and I'm now candidate for United States Congress 5th Congressional District. Today, I've been informed that another inmate has been murdered at the Clayton County Jail. Not the inmate here that's playing in this video. I'll get to that in a second. But another inmate has been murdered at the Clayton County Jail. That means 6 men have been murdered. I'm not talking about dying of natural causes. I'm not talking about bed bugs or anything like that. 6 men have been murdered in the Clayton County Jail since I've been gone. During my 15-year tenure, we never had a murder. Now, why am I showing this video? Well, there's a reason for it. It's not really for the public to see. I want this video to be seen by 4 people. 4 specific people. I want them to see this video because I want to discuss today the domino effect of leadership, or the domino effect of bad leadership, rather. The 4 individuals that I want to see this young man who's being beaten in the Clayton County Jail. Number 1 is Jeff Turner, the boy who would be sheriff, the one who helped solicit so-called victims to come prosecute me with so he could try and run for sheriff. Tasha Mosley, the Clayton County DA, the dummy that went right along with it and took it down to the U.S. attorney thinking this is a great idea. U.S. Attorney Brian Buchanan, former U.S. Attorney Brian Buchanan, he resigned when the president came in because he knew what time it was, and rightfully so. It should have happened if he stayed. Judge Eleanor Ross, the judge in my case, the judge that didn't disclose that she was friends with Tasha Mosley. Her husband used to work at the DA's office with her, didn't disclose she was friends with my political opponents, even though it's on Facebook where she's clearly friends with one of them. Those are the 4 people I really want to see this video. Now, here's a reason why. As we discussed bad leadership and a domino effect. I've discussed lawfare and how I'm going to fight lawfare as a United States Congressman. But I want people to see the effects of lawfare. You take the criminal justice system and you use it to prosecute somebody. You make up a crime that no one ever even heard of before. You solicit people who've been out of the jail, some for almost a year, and say, hey, look, were you in a restraint chair? Oh, you're a victim. You know what? You can get some money. We'll drop your charges. You get them to go lie to a grand jury. You get them to come to court and lie. You promise them that they're going to hit the Clayco lottery. And now you don't even want to give them no money at all, which probably I think that Jeff and them think that that's a hit at me, but actually you're doing me a favor because they don't deserve any money because nothing happened to them. They weren't tortured. They weren't injured. If they were tortured and injured, then that means the 630 plus people that sat in that same chair at my jail that was put in that chair by other officers, other commanders, then that means they were all injured and they all deserve money too. And we know that's not the case. But what I want for you to look at what you caused. You had a county that had a low crime rate. And right after you did what you did, the murder rate went to an all-time high. You got folks claiming the crime is down now, but the murder rate has already exceeded the murder rate from last year thus far. And we're getting ready to go into the third quarter tomorrow. You got a jail that's drug infested, people having overdoses, people getting beaten like this young man so they could extort their families for money, saying, if you don't send us money, we're going to beat your loved ones. And you want to lie to the public and tell them that these guys needed protection from me? You should have been protecting him from those fools right there. I'm pretty sure this young man wished there was a restraint chair to restrain these violent fools right there. And see, this is a classic example of what happens when leaders protect criminals instead of protecting the citizens and instead of protecting those who protect the citizens. Am I saying that cops should not be prosecuted? If they do something wrong, like if they're doing something like this, of course. But when you use the criminal justice system to prosecute the people who protect us, when you use it to prosecute teachers, when you use it to prosecute parents, this is what we get. And I want those particular 4 individuals to see the domino effect of what they did. You thought you were doing something to me and didn't even think what you were doing to all of the families who had people in that jail who they want to come out safe. And now they don't know if they're going to come out safe or not. Who were they truly protecting criminals from? Me? I'm going to say this in conclusion. We're seeing mass shootings across the country. We had 3 young men shot at a basketball tournament in Clayton County over the weekend. I don't even have to go into all the ones that got shot recently at the skating rink, the Walmart, Kroger. Again, a jail, drug infested, people died of overdoses. Another young man gang raped. I think he's still in the hospital. And this is the domino effect when you see people go with malicious false prosecutions to go after elected officials. This is what happens when they protect criminals instead of protecting citizens.
Wow.
And we're seeing this across the country, Christi.
Yeah. And so when we're hearing about some of these things, how is it that like this, I just don't, Victor, I really don't understand how it can go on because there's supposed to be cameras everywhere. Listen, we know in the Epstein files that, how does even a camera get shut off? How do we answer some of these questions that are coming, that are coming forth from the jail, the prison system? Because I have a whole take on like, how do we even get there to begin with? Well, how do you jail somebody for a misdemeanor that should have been let go? Because it's political attacks. You were politically attacked. I know I was politically attacked, taken down to the ground by a man who ran against a guy that I supported for the FOP police union position of president. I saw the president last night. They wanted me to hate him. They wanted me to hate all officers. No, I get it. I see you. I know who you are. Matter of fact, I didn't know who you were before. Like, I'd never seen you. But the reality is, how did we get here where people, and like even in politics, can't just go, okay, you won the election, now I have to work with you. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, I have to work with you. I mean, how did we get there? How do you think we got there? I mean, obviously the same thing happened with you. I mean, I'm talking about in my world, it was Republican on Republican on Republican, you know, like 2 Republicans were running for something. I supported one over another. And within a minute and a half of getting out of your car, you've decided that you're going to you're so determined that you're going to literally tackle me and arrest me, take me to the ground on my own property. So, you know, I mean, these are the things that are happening to people. And by the way, Victor, I was just recording them giving my neighbor a ticket for honking her horn. Imagine that. Even my neighbor getting a ticket for honking her horn when on a daily basis, I mean, literally I've posted, and Banana Republic News has posted my videos of ice cream trucks doing way worse things. You know, I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's not really funny. But like, my neighbor toots her horn, she gets a ticket, but the ice cream truck comes and like wakes up every building for hours, you know, for sometimes 45 minutes. They play their tune, like to the point where if I'm on the phone with you, you're like, what the hell is that? You know, it's like, oh, that's the ice cream truck. You know, it's like, we can't even make this stuff up. So, well, it's like selective prosecution to begin with. So that makes me question, does everybody in jail, I mean, do we have to question, like, should they really be here? You know, I mean, that's, you know, is that something that you as sheriff, like, had to look at?
Well, we got to question it a lot. We really do. Because, you know, the last I heard, they said 1 out of every 20 convictions is false. I get the strange feeling that those numbers are probably higher. And what we see a lot is we see a lot of prosecutors and folks playing with the law. You know, again, we talked about it briefly last show I was on, grand juries. You can indict a person on any charge, even if it doesn't fit the element. And I think I brought it up last time, like in Clayton County, we had some coaches, they're coaching a track star. The track star collapses and dies. They indict them on murder. Now, murder means malice aforethought. It carries the death penalty in some states. And it's not murder. Maybe at best involuntary manslaughter. Let's say you want to say they were negligent. That's fine, but it's not murder. But the fact that you're able to get an indictment on a charge that doesn't fit the crime, and they claim they do it so that they can plead down to a lesser charge, where you get them to plead to what they're actually guilty of, if they're guilty with that at all. Yeah. You know, same thing if you look at in my case, how they were able to get an indictment, and they're able to convince a grand jury that even though the policy and training says I can use a chair the way I use a chair, well, no, it's really a crime. It's a violation of civil rights. And these are the type of games that these prosecutors play. And the only way to really stop it is to reform grand juries, reform the plea deals, and reform the mens rea requirement that would require willful intent. But you said something interesting about how did this all get started. Well, I got something interesting to tell you. You know, unfortunately, and I write about it in the book, it has gone on since we can remember. We read about lawfare in the Bible. I mean, if you look at the book of Daniel, he was actually a public official getting ready to get promoted. And the way the book reads, there were some folks that didn't want him to get promoted, so they tried to come up with a criminal charge, and none of it would fit. So then they made up some other charge, and that's how he actually got thrown into the lion's den. But ultimately, if you want to talk about lawfare, ultimately is a story of our Lord and Savior. And I'm not comparing my case to his, of course, but you know, you when he went before Pontius Pilate, even he said, well, I can't really find a crime here. And the folks were, no, let the murderer go and let's prosecute him instead. And he yielded to political pressure and did it. And we see, and the reason I bring that up is I think it's an interesting analogy. there was this big thing going on. It's still going on to this day. Let's prosecute cops. And we got a lot of folks that they were more interested in prosecuting cops than they were prosecuting criminals. Matter of fact, if they prosecute the cop, hey, let's drop all the charges on the criminals. It's like, yeah, I know you just killed somebody. I know you just did this or whatever you did. But what this cop did, we want to prosecute him instead. Why? And when you start concentrating on prosecuting cops and letting the criminals go, which is exactly what we saw in that scripture, there was a guy that committed murder. But instead, no, let's prosecute the guy that was raising the dead and let the murderer go. Well, that type of insanity we're seeing play out in the criminal justice system today. And you got a lot of Pontius Pilates that wear robes and prosecutors. I thought you would appreciate that as a Christian woman.
Absolutely. And it's true. And you're 100% right. This has been going on. I mean, you know, and even my husband reminds me of that, honey, this has been going on. Like, he literally is like, there's nothing you're going to change. Of course, you know, I'm the person that thinks I can change it. And, you know,
I think we can make a difference. The reason they're able to do this is because of grand juries. And I think what we saw back then was a earlier form of a grand jury. And, you know, all countries have abolished grand juries except the United States and Liberia. Liberia rarely uses it. The United Kingdom abolished grand juries in the 1930s. And we need to abolish it. If we can't abolish it, we got to at least reform it. I think it takes a constitutional amendment to abolish it on a federal level. There are 2 states that don't use grand juries.
Well, when you're on Congress, then what will you have the power to do? Like, what will you do for this reform? Because, you know, one of the things that I see is, you know, I don't really think it's fair for the judges to own the jails, you know. So, you know, I feel like if we could start there, that might be helpful, because then maybe there wouldn't be as much prosecutorial malice, you know, malice prosecutorial. And then the other side of it is, you know, if you've got a prosecutor, you know, I think we all want to think like, you know, and we appreciate prosecutors who are really genuinely putting the bad guys in jail, you know,
right.
because, you know, they do hurt us. We don't want to, you know, there are people out there that do want to hurt us. There are murders. There are real situations. There are real crimes occurring.
Right.
But, you know, I would like to see it so that, you know, especially like in a world of politics, that you cannot prosecute. You cannot even be a part of any prosecution of a person in which you have gone against. And I would think that would be a conflict of interest, or, you know, something extremely clear. Like you mentioned in your case that you had, and you may have to help me out, we had 2 people that knew you, that were prosecutors or something.
Yes, the DA who took this case to the United States, to the U.S. attorney, was friends with the judge that oversaw my case. That judge's husband, who's a state court judge now in another county, DeKalb County, worked at the DA's office with this prosecutor. And he was also at the DA's office. I think I told a story the last time where they came at me for allegedly stealing my own police car 5 times. Of course, those charges I was acquitted on. But there was this constant, because the DA is a political enemy of mine, there was this constant, what can we prosecute him with so we can get a felony on him so we could get him out of politics.
Yeah, they wanted to.
Exactly. But the judge was friends with her. And also the judge was friends with my political opponent. The judge never disclosed that. So you're right. Things like that should have been disclosed.
Wait, they have to disclose those type of things, though. I mean, they have to. They're disclosures.
Well, it didn't happen in my case. And it's something that I wrote about in a book. And, you know, one day we'll talk about attorneys, because the attorneys were aware of it. And I told them, hey, you need to file a motion about this. And they didn't want to do it. You know, that's another thing we got to talk about, too, because when you get caught up in this criminal justice system, some of these attorneys, they got relations, too. They're representing you. But the judge you're representing you against could be someone they went to law school with or someone they hang out with. And it becomes a game. And you got to really find attorneys that are really trying to go to bat for you. They'll take your money and represent you, but how well do they represent you? And that's a whole nother, you know, that's a whole nother show that you and I could do, and we could get into some details on that. But the fact that that wasn't
That's going to be our next show, everybody. Unless our commenters decide something different, that's going to be the next show because it is absolute lawfare. And my quick answer to that is pro se. But I know everybody can't file things pro se. They don't understand how it is very difficult. And speaking of that, in your reform process, one of the things I would like to see you do in Congress is actually make the pro se filing process much easier. I mean, think about it. We have, we're supposedly like in the world of tech. And then also, the other thing that I see that could help, and I know a lot of people, this is going to make a lot of people mad. Okay. But, if you can run something through AI and say, what is the probability of something? And it says, well, there's a very low prosecutorial, process on something, then why would a prosecutor waste his or her time? Well, sometimes they're wasting their time because it's political and they have the police going, please, 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 in my case, the police, are like, they really need them to get anything on me. Like, because if they don't get something on me, they've literally George Floyded me. Okay. I'm a female, white, George Floyd with one guy that's probably Puerto Rican. I don't know. And the other one's probably Cuban. And the black lady, they wanted to put everything off on her. And she's like, no. Like, she's not having it. But that's who they wanted to put. They wanted to put like the whole report off on the black lady. Okay. Black officer. Imagine that, right? You want to throw your dirty deeds on the black officer. Yeah. That's basically what they did. Yeah.
Wow.
So let me ask you a question on that. Considering you may know the answer to this. Let's just say that you have a police report or a sheriff's deputy's report. Who was supposed to sign, like when that report is created, is the person that signs the report responsible for all the contents there?
Yes, they are. They're supposed to make sure that is
accurate,
understandable, accurate. Now, here's where it gets funny. If they got direct knowledge, they got to be held that, hey, this is accurate if they were there. A lot of times when those supervisors come and sign a report, all they can do is really read it and make sure that it's written well and grammatically correct, because they're not actual witnesses of what actually occurred. Now, if they were actually witnesses of what occurred, well, then they've got to make sure that it's accurate. One thing that helps with that is when you make sure that some of these reports aren't vague, because all reports should have who, where, when, how, what, and why in it. And that's a part of the supervisor's job to make sure it's a very, very detailed report. The one thing that you can't always control, unfortunately, is when you have people under your command who lie. And how you see a lot of false prosecutions come about, they can only come about for really one or two reasons. Either false testimony of the officer, or they actually plant evidence on somebody. And that's where you see these false testimonies come by the officers lying or planting evidence on people. And that's what you got to look out for as a law enforcement leader.
Well, let me ask you this, because consider we're talking about inside the jail. So it would be really easy for an officer, like a corrections officer, to plant something like on a person, like let's just say they brought the drugs in and, there's going to be like some type of, you're coming through as the sheriff, you're going to like run the dogs through. It would be really easy, for them, instead of having to flush those drugs or whatever, to plant them on an inmate, right? I mean, or, did things like that, do you think it's a possibility that it happens? Because, I know that there were a lot of people that were inside the jail that were literally like begging me to write stories on them and talk about their cases, because they're like, we did not do this. And even while I was sitting there, I witnessed an officer, a black girl, would not allow them to open her phone without a warrant. She says that they were trying to get her son for a murder. They were trying to pin a murder on him. She says her son, like, evidently, I don't know if she didn't talk to her son, but she's like, there's no way her son murdered whoever, but they were going to try to put murder on him. They know me. They, obviously she had a record. So it was evidently like an easy, and the way she described it, it was an easy pickings for the officers to plant the murder on her son and try to get her to talk to her son. So, like, in other words, they were at her house. She wouldn't open the phone. They kept threatening her. If you don't open the phone, we're going to like find drugs. And she was like, there are no drugs. So like, look all you want. She's like, there's no evidence in my house because this did not happen. And so I'm sitting there with her. We're both, by the way, chained to a bench. And she's turning around and she goes, they're going to come back and they're going to try to plant something on me. Sure enough, like 5 minutes later, the officer comes back in and he says, we just found like 2 or 3 balls of cocaine in your Louis Vuitton purse. And she looked at me and she goes, oh my God, I don't even have a Louis Vuitton purse. Literally, those are the type of things that I've heard, inside the system.
So let me say this. When I first got in law enforcement, I think I was naive, meaning, I've always wanted to be a cop since I was a child. And I thought that I was getting ready to join a profession that everybody is honest and it's truth and justice the American way. And, and they were all supermen. They could shoot, they could fight. And I found out something that was very, very disappointing. Not that those guys don't exist. There's some very strong American heroes that wear that badge and gun. But there's also a group in there, too, that you truly don't know about. And that I had to learn as a cop. I never forget when I was a rookie, it was like, hey, don't leave your stuff in the locker because I know this is a police department, but don't take off and take feet. And I remember thinking, wait a second, there's all cops here. We stop people from stealing. There's no way someone's going to steal something from another cop. But they were telling the truth.
Wow.
Right. So I quickly found that, it's not the badge, it's not the gun, it's not the robe, it's not the title of prosecutor, but it's the person that has to have the integrity. And that person has to have that integrity before they get to the job. So I have seen and fired people for lying under oath as a law enforcement leader, but also as a victim of lawfare. I've seen prosecutors lie to grand juries. I mean, literally, I think I spoke about it last time we were on the show. Made up a story. Said, hey, a guy had a mask put on him and he was punched. And when the mask was taken off, the sheriff was there. And they tried to imply as if though I did it. It was on the grand jury, whatever. But interesting, we get to trial, it never comes up. This guy gets on the stand because they knew it wasn't true.
Wow.
But they were willing to lie to.
They only did it for the grand jury. To get the grand jury to prosecute? To
get the indictment, because you got to think about it. My case was very unique. Most cases involving, no, not most, cases involving a restraint chair is a restraint chair plus, meaning you put the person in a restraint chair and you tased him, you punched him, you did something to him. I'm the first in the history of the United States that I'm prosecuted for ordering the person in a restraint chair. That's it. Didn't touch them, nothing. A nurse checked them before they got in, checked them when they got out. They were checked every 15 minutes, but they're saying just you ordering them to do it was punishment.
Well,
so
and that's
all
what
the
I want
other
everybody to understand, because I don't think that everybody really understands this, because I certainly did not. And that's the reason I started out with there's a healthcare, like there's Jackson healthcare system inside the Miami-Dade County prison. Okay, so in your case, what is the healthcare system that was inside the prison, especially the prison
Right, there was a medical company that was there, and their job,
like the doctors, the nurses. So I think everybody can understand. In my case, there was literally like a woman that looked like Nurse Ratched, like literally,
right,
like Nurse Ratched, had the hat on and everything. Okay.
And by policy, a nurse has to come and check the handcuffs to make sure they're not too tight when they're in the restraint chair. And they have to be checked every 15 minutes. And they have to be checked out. Only one guy, out of the folks I was accused of, one was let out of the chair because he had a gash on his wrist. Guess where that came from? From him rocking himself in the chair because he wanted to get out. And guess what? They let him out. Okay, so that was a self-inflicted whatever, because we know it happened that way because the nurse checked him. Another one complained about his arm, so they let him loose and reposition him. So there's proof that these guys had medical care the whole time they're there. Mm-hmm. So that's why this case is so unique. I'm the first in the history. Even a judge admitted at my sentencing. Usually these cases involve assaultive behavior, tasing, beating, etc., and none of which occurred here because it didn't occur. It was a case. And so let's think about this. If you look at the section code, violation of civil rights, it's a misdemeanor and a felony. The misdemeanor, the felony is if you cause some type of injury to somebody. Okay, the misdemeanor is there's no serious injury or nothing. They were able to get indictments on a felony by lying to the grand jury to make it sound like these guys were injured, and they wasn't. And no one went to the hospital when they got out. There was no documented injury, and these people were contacted after the fact. Were you in the chair? So that goes to show how prosecutors are willing to lie and stretch the truth to get an indictment. So I say that to get back to what you're saying, so I don't get too far off. Is it possible for these people to plant evidence? Yes, I know it is because it happened to me. And there are times where I had to intervene on certain cases under my command because it was ridiculous. Don't let me forget to tell you about the firecracker arrest.
What powers, what are some of the things that you did to intervene to actually stop some of this as sheriff? And then how will you further be able to, when you are in Congress, what will you be able to do to actually tailor the system so that it cannot happen?
Absolutely. Well, let me tell you what I could do as a sheriff. People under my command, I could stop it when I saw craziness. It's easy to throw charges on people, and it's easy to manipulate words so a charge can fit. Good example. A young lady comes to the Clayton County courthouse and she sets up a firecracker in the courtroom, which is a pretty dumb thing to do, and they locked her up and they should have. But guess what? They charge her with an explosive device charge. That's a felony that carries 10 or more years in court.
Wow.
Okay, now, it wasn't a bomb. It was a firecracker. And I got a call from her attorney on this, and I agreed with him that it was ridiculous. And I called the deputies in, and I was like, listen, I don't have a problem with you locking her up, but why this charge? I mean, couldn't you go with disorderly conduct or something like that? I said, look, go to the DA and get that charge put to something that more fits the crime. Well, they come back to me and they tell me, well, the DA said you're either going to have to drop the charge or that's it. They're not going to reduce it. Of course, it's the same dummy DA's office that came after me with these made-up charges. And I said, well, I guess we're going to drop the charges because we're not going to trial to take someone to jail for 10 years for a fire. Dude, she should have been locked up on some type of misdemeanor charge or whatever. But she could not blow up the courthouse with a firecracker. That just couldn't happen.
Right.
So it didn't fit. One day I was outside of the Sally Port.
How old was this young lady?
She appeared to be in her late 20s.
Okay. So
right.
what was her excuse for doing it? I'm just curious.
She didn't have an excuse. She's just a dummy that wanted to scare some people or whatever.
Yeah. So
then one day I'm on the Sally Port, and one of my deputies pull up, and he has a man locked up in the back of the car, and he says, "Hey, this guy, I said, what you got him for?" He said he was driving a stolen car. He said, but I don't think he knows the car was stolen. He's going to give us information. He bought the car from a guy. He showed me the paper. I think the guy changed the VIN or whatever. So he's going to give us information so we can track this guy down and get him. I said, okay, that's good. So if that's the case, why is he locked up?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you mean what? Okay, if you really believe he didn't do it and the other guy did it and he's working with you, why are we putting this felony charge on him and putting him in jail to walk him through the system? Why not do a further investigation and figure out if what his story is true, which we've done before? I had a situation where actually it was a commander of the police department. His son got stopped in the car, and his son said, Clay, the same thing happened. I said, okay, well, let's do further investigation. If it's another guy, that's fine. Unfortunately, his son actually stole the car. So we went and locked his son up, but we gave him the benefit of the doubt long enough to see if the story was true. And it turns out this guy's story was true anyway. So, there's a lot of discretion that comes when you're an officer. There's a lot of discretion that comes when you're a prosecutor, when you're a judge. And if you put folks in place that don't use good discretion, that's a problem. But then you got some other folks that are not trying to use good discretion. They're simply lying. And remember, omission as well as commission. So it's not necessarily what you tell a jury or what you tell a grand jury, but also what you fail to tell them. that could just stop the whole case. Like take my case for instance. They never wanted to tell a jury that, hey, we actually went and found these guys and asked them were they in a restraint chair, and they agreed to prosecute. They tried to give this illusion that 6 guys popped up one day and said, hey, help us, we were tortured. And then they had to make up stuff. Like, ironically, out of the 630 some people who was in the jail, only the 6 I authorized to be in the jail urinated on themselves. So how is it that all of them urinated on themselves, but not 630? Yeah. And where's the decontamination report? Yeah. Where's the change of uniform report? You got to decontaminate the chair. You can't take him out the chair and then let another guy sit in urine. So if this really happened, it didn't happen. But it goes to show that there are people who are prosecutors, who are in law enforcement, and they're willing to lie to get an indictment, and then they'll lie to get a conviction. And with those people, there's one other thing that has to be done with them. You have to do with them the same thing I used to do with drug dealers. I can't cause a man to not want to sell drugs or whatever, but what I can do is the same way I can make it impossible for a child to get the Clorox by putting it in a place where he can't get it. That's what I did with drug dealers, and that's what we ultimately got to do with these type of prosecutors. I would simply put a car in front of a drug dealer's house. That way he couldn't sell drugs. So I didn't really deal with his heart and his integrity. I just made it impossible for him to sell drugs. Well, we got to make it impossible for prosecutors to use grand juries like that. And the way to do that is either eliminate grand juries or reform them. And you reform them by allowing the defendant to be able to sit there with his attorney, hear what's being said, and refute it, as opposed to just creating a star chamber where they go in there and you're not even in there. They tell the grand jury whatever you want. And then voila, you're indicted. And they walk out and they talk about, we got an indictment today. Well, of course you did. Anyone can do that. Yeah. When they can't defend themselves.
So speaking of that, like when it comes to arrest, one of the things I want people to walk away here today, as we close, what are the things that you recommend that they do if they are under arrest, or if they, if they're on the way to jail? Tell them what you would recommend that they do, whether it's how they act, what they say or what don't say, and then
here's what I'm going to recommend, and everybody hates it. Everybody hates it. Comply. And you can comply and record with your cell phone. You can comply and have witnesses. A lot of people try to hold court on the streets, and you're not going to win there. And the only thing can happen is you can get yourself hurt or other people hurt. My father had this saying when we were learning how to drive: here lies the man that has the right of way. Meaning you got a tractor trailer coming, you got the right of way, but hey, well, I got the right of way, so I'm going out there anyway and get demolished by a tractor trailer. It doesn't make any sense. Okay. But when you comply, you take half of the power away if it is a corrupt cop or whatever, and especially if they got a body cam, because now they can't say that you were being combative, you were arguing or whatever. And then now you can make the observations you need to make, record it if you got the opportunity to do so, have someone else to record it, and then move on from there. Even when you're right, even like, for instance, I've been indicted twice for something I didn't do, but me not cooperating and not turning myself in or not telling them, that's the type of stuff that complicates the situation even further. So you got to unfortunately fight it in court. Now, don't get me wrong. We know how the court system is. If you got judges that are friends with somebody, like the situation I had was rigged from the start, but I would have complicated it by not turning myself in or being combative with the officers. What you got to do is observe and take down as much notes as you can, and take the truth to court and pray that you don't have a judge who rigged the case like I did because she's friends with the people and was involved with what's behind it. You know what I'm saying?
Speaking of that, what about disclosures? Do you wish that because here's the other thing a lot of people don't realize is if you have an attorney, you're not supposedly allowed to file anything on your own case. Like, in other words, like the attorney won't let you file anything. So, I would say that, when it comes to attorneys, if they're not doing, one of the first things that I would look out for is those disclosures, the disclosure file to be filed.
You know, it's interesting you should say that. I just had a situation like that. You know, there's still some pending lawsuits with these restraint chairs that these guys were encouraged to do, conspired to do with some of the government officials that came up with this. And then they decided, and this is a whole other show in itself, the county commission, remember, there's a guy in the county commission that wanted to be sheriff. And he was encouraging a lot of people to sue the sheriff's office and say, hey, you hit the clinical lottery, just so he thought it could get him to be sheriff. Well, think about this.
So
They were paying.
do you think they should be prosecuted? I mean, shouldn't they be prosecuted when they're encouraging somebody to sue?
I totally agree. But guess what? He's friends with the DA. I mean, we know for a fact he was involved in 2 scams with Clayton County, with money being funneled. And it's not even being investigated.
Isn't that RICO? I mean, isn't that?
Yeah, it is.
RICO is. I mean, like I always thought that's what RICO was. You know, like getting somebody to do something so that you can benefit, this person can benefit. And speaking of,
remember when you talk about selective prosecution? I mean, you and I got a lot to talk about. This same DA and this guy are friends. She sat on a board of a Rainbow House with kids. They were being molested by employees. One who's a friend of hers. Complaints were being made. They sent complaints to her. They sent complaints to this guy we're talking about. He throws it in the trash can. They're just disgruntled. The kids continue to get molested. Of course, she's not going to investigate him, and she's not going to investigate herself. Right. And if it wasn't for a leak, no one would have got prosecuted. And one of the main persons, who's her friend, still hasn't gone to jail yet. It's been out on bail for a long time, and they tried to do something slick to see if they could get her off not too long ago. So the problem is, what happens when the prosecutors are involved? And then if they got friends, they selectively prosecute. Remember this, and I think this came up before. There's a case at the Clayton County Jail where a man was in a restraint chair and was beaten unconscious by 2 deputies. They settled the suit for $5 million. The deputies never get prosecuted. We don't even know who they are. This happens after.
So
right,
is that,
right.
Have you turned them into the feds for RICO? I mean, because that sounds like RICO. It sounds like somebody benefited from that $5 million, and you know.
Well, in all honesty,
correct.
at that time couldn't you because think about it. They had went to the U.S. attorney, who resigned now that the president came in. Now there might be hope for that, because you got to understand they were able to work this out with a U.S. attorney and a federal judge that's there now. So that would have been a waste of time. Now that there's a new administration in, we're very, very hopeful that they're going to make their way down to Atlanta and look at these corrupt prosecutors. The U.S. attorney that was involved in this, Buchanan, he resigned.
I really do hope you'll turn them in for RICO, and actually just whatever report that you file for RICO, that's what I would send to our pardon czar and request a pardon, because you said you have already appealed and you lost the appeal, right?
They wouldn't even hear the appeal in the Supreme Court.
I don't understand how they said that they couldn't hear the appeal. Like, there has to be a court that will hear your appeal.
Well, let me tell you this. The Supreme Court is very, very interesting. First, if you look at the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, the same judge, when we tried to do an appeal bond because we were appealing, he denies it. Well, guess who was on the 3rd Circuit panel to look at the appeal? So we already knew we wasn't going to get anywhere in the 11th Circuit. That was just a formality. Mm-hmm. The formality was to get to the Supreme Court so they could see all of the stuff that went on, the coercion of juror. And then to get to the Supreme Court has to agree to even hear it. It's a name for it. I forgot what it's called. Third. Right. And I'm not even sure if it's the justices that make that decision. I think it's some clerks or something. It's very political. So they look through a whole bunch of cases and then they decide, okay, whether we're going to hear it or not. And the cert was denied. And when you look at all the incestuous relationships that happened in my case, you can't help but to wonder what was the case with that as well, too. But, they'll tell you this doesn't mean that your case is invalid. It just means that we're not going to hear it. But they deny cert. Now, that's a whole nother conversation we can have. Just to file something in the Supreme Court is $5,000. It was $5,000. Can you imagine? Just to file it is $5,000.
No way.
I kid you not. And you're filing
that's what I'm hoping you're going to change in Congress, because that is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. Right.
When we have basically we have a justice system that's unjustly operating against us. Meanwhile, they're draining your income if you try to file anything against them.
Right.
And sometimes when you file and they take your filing fees, it's like a money laundering operation because they don't even want to respond to your filing.
Can you imagine you spend $5,000 not knowing whether they're going to hear the case or not? It's one thing, okay, we're going to file it and they're at least going to hear the case. And that's the case. So most people that take these pleas, see, that's why when they talk about conviction rates and how many convictions are false convictions, I think the number is a whole lot higher because there's a lot of people that they just can't afford to fight it. So they're looking for a way out. They can't. So like, hey, I could think of a very dear friend of mine. Unfortunately, he passed away not too long ago. Very, very well-known guy. He was a former commissioner of New York. And I remember we were talking about both of our cases, and he was saying how, it just got to the point where we couldn't afford to fight it anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's what and then it forces people to take pleas and stuff like that. And okay, well, they're trying to minimize the damage or the risk. So basically, that's why we call it a plea gun. So okay, hey, look, if I fight this, it's gonna cost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
If you lose, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. I apologize.
No problem.
But if you lose the case, or if you win a case, they don't have to pay you back. But if you lose, you've got to pay them. Think about that.
Exactly. And you're right. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of stuff that's just unfair. And so then these people, and then don't forget the threats. Okay, well, I tell you what, we'll give you 5 years, but if you lose, you can probably get 20 years. So if I try to exercise my constitutional rights because I want to prove that I'm innocent, well, now if I lose, I go to jail for more time. That's not right. But here's the crazy part. You're not necessarily losing because you're guilty. I mean, I sat there through my trial, and the judge does this thing called motion in limine, or what we can present and what we can't present. And the judge didn't even allow the victims of what these guys did to testify. There were two old ladies. One was 80 years old that got knocked out of a wheelchair by this guy. That was one of the guys that I had restrained. And she came to trial to testify for me. And the judge didn't want her to testify. She said, we don't need to hear that. Wow. So imagine this, judge is like a referee. And we all seen in sports, if the referee is one-sided and wants one side to win, what they'll do. Well, if you get a judge that's not just being fair and okay, hey, just let the facts be what it is, then you get what I got. And then you end up finding out that this judge has a vested interest in you getting convicted and is working hard to make it happen,
Yep. Okay, so I want to do a quick fire round, and then we can dive deeper into whatever you want us to. Whatever when they comment below, we'll dive deeper into it next time. Just one of these. What is the most common form of corruption you've seen inside the prisons? Financial, political, or operational?
Wow, they're almost all about equal when you think about it. Okay. It depends on it depends on who's at the top when you're talking about political. But it's always going to be.
That's the question. You can't go any further because we're going to do a rapid fire. Okay, because
Okay.
Speaking of that leads into my next question. Who is really in control of the prisons? The sheriffs, wardens, private contractors, or politicians?
It depends on who. It depends on what jurisdiction. If it's a county, it's the sheriff. In my jurisdiction, it's the sheriff.
Okay. On the oversight agencies, are they effective at rooting out corruption, or are they compromised?
Compromised.
Okay. How much does politicians' role play in covering up the wrongdoing inside correctional facilities?
Probably more than 60%.
Okay. How do private prison contracts and vendors contribute to corruption inside the system?
They contribute to it more so outside the system when you got sheriffs that let people get contracts so they can benefit from it.
Okay, yeah, because in the Miami-Dade County prison, they were literally like selling a pair of shoes they probably paid 10 cents for like $25, and it wasn't even going to last anybody any amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can you explain how the commissionary system's phone contracts and medical contracts are abused for profit?
That happens two ways. I think people are overcharged for it. You know, when you look at how much it costs to make a phone call in the jail, that's how it's abused, because it doesn't even cost that much to have a cell phone.
Yep. Who is making money off the prisoners' families, and how do politicians benefit?
Vendors and politicians are, if there's a corruption thing going on, and correctional officers are doing it.
Yeah, because I want to go deep into this the next time, some of the contracts.
Sure.
Do kickbacks and campaign donations from prison contractors influence decision making?
It can if the leader's corrupt.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be a kickback anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So we've gone into quite a bit of the treatment of inmates, so we won't go there. Do you feel like correction officers receive enough training to resist corruption, or are they often pressured into just being corrupt?
It has nothing to do with training. You're either corrupt if you're not. Now, I believe they need to be paid more money. Yes. But even if you pay them more money, they can always make more money selling drugs and selling cell phones in the jail than they can no matter what you pay them. So it has to deal with their integrity and who they are.
And then how big of a role does gang infiltration or correctional staff play into corruption?
It plays a lot into it, because that's how they're cooperating with each other to bring drugs and weapons into the jail.
And then are staff shortages, do you think, being used as an excuse to cut corners that endanger inmates?
I can tell you it is being used as an excuse, especially at the jail I used to command, because it's not really a staff shortage, it's what you're using the staff for.
Okay. And then how does prison corruption connect to the local government corruption?
It connects a lot, because everything happens because of leadership or the lack of thereof.
All because of leadership that we vote for. How do local sheriffs and politicians use jails as political weapons? Well, we know that, don't we?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
They can silence you in some way, shape, or form. So these are things that we all need to consider when we go to vote. And how does prison corruption spill over into communities once inmates are released?
It definitely, my thing is, if you can't control the jail, how can you control the streets? The jail's a controlled environment. It's easier for me. It was easier for me to control the jail than it was for me to control the streets, and I had control over both. But if a sheriff can't control his jail, if he can't stop crime in his jail, how can he possibly stop crime on the street?
And because you were politically attacked yourself, or I believe you were, in it with all the connections that weren't brought forth, in your experience, what was the most shocking act of corruption you personally uncovered before, like I'm wondering if you had uncovered something that you may not even realize that you had uncovered during the process. Like as a journalist, this happens. Like I'll go down a rabbit hole of different companies, seeing who owns what. And then you're like, holy crap, like this goes back to communist China or this. And it's like, if I can figure this out, surely our feds can figure this out. Or surely our local government can figure it out. And then,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but then sometimes I talk to politicians and they know it, and it's like, oh wow, you guys knew this and you still went through with it, So is there something like that maybe you uncovered, or do you think that maybe you had actually stopped the drug distribution inside the prisons, the drugs, the phone, like stopped some form of cartel that? Because obviously you were massively attacked. So I'm just wondering if you had just, gone too far in their eyes.
I haven't been able to put the link together yet, but it's very interesting to me that there were no drugs in the Clayton County jail. Now it's drug infested. Someone's making a killing off of the drugs that's going in that jail now. And whoever that is, I'm sure they're glad I'm gone, because they started right after I left.
Yeah.
And so they actually profit from having the person who's there now, because they know as long as a guy is there that's weak or not going to do anything about it. They can sell all the drugs they want. Now, who that is, I've had conversations. I've often wondered who it is. Somebody is making a killing off of drugs and cell phones in that jail. And whoever they weren't able to do it when I was there. Do I know who it is? I haven't uncovered that yet. And I think another shock to me too was relationships. Like I think the biggest shock in my federal case would be the relationship of the federal court judge that she had, and then explain why she did so many things she was doing during the trial.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so do you find that corruptions in prisons are getting worse or better throughout America?
They're definitely not getting better, and there's only one way to stop it. And of course, I know how to stop it because I've stopped it before.
Yeah,
and I'd like to see it, and it actually makes it safer for all the people who are there. You know, it's sad when you go on a misdemeanor charge. Anyone can go to jail on a misdemeanor charge, no insurance license, and then come out in a body bag, which has happened at the Clayton County jail, you know?
Yeah, and it's very
so dangerous.
Yeah,
right.
It's very, very sad. You know, I think it's sad to see the state that we're in. I think it's sad to see that, you know, you being a strong black male, that, you know, you were not accepted. That makes me extremely sad because it's like, oh my gosh, you're like the dream guy, you know, for your citizens. And, you know, and to think that, you know, they try to silence you in that way is just disgusting. Well, Victor, that wraps us up for today. I look forward to our next chat. I mean, there's so much, man, that we.
Yeah, there's a lot of meat on these bones, as they say.
There really is a lot of meat on these bones. So
yeah.
I mean, we've got so much to go over. So, hey, listen, audience, make sure that you comment below. Let us know, what do you want us to talk about next? What do you want to learn about? And let's go there. And then make sure, Victor, go ahead and pitch your website for your campaign.
Yes, it's victorhillforcongress.com. And also, you know, I forgot to mention last time, you know, I have a podcast with my brothers called The Hill of Justice.
Yes. We were going to bring that up. Yep.
Right, the Hill of Justice podcast. Interestingly, not only do we have a syndicated, but we go live occasionally. Let me just say this. Tonight at 7:00 is going to be very interesting. We're going to have a guest that was the main witness in a trial, a murder trial. If you remember the Atlanta riots, there were actually armed thugs that were holding road checks and letting some people in and out. Not the police, armed thugs. I write about it in my book because I got word of it and tried to get it stopped. It was out of my jurisdiction. Well, this is a classic example of what happens when politicians stop law enforcement from doing their jobs, and they collude with criminals instead of doing other things. And as a result, 3 weeks into this road check, they get in a shootout and they kill an 8-year-old girl. Well, we're going to have a guest who was the main witness in that trial and talk about how it even it should have never happened. The minute that road check happened, it should have stopped. And we're going to talk about the politics and the people that allowed it to happen and why this 8-year-old child lost her life.
Yeah, that's sad. That's extremely sad. Well, listen, I appreciate your voice, sir, and I appreciate you today. And I'll make sure to share all the links for you so you can share with your audience if you want. But God bless you. And like, I can't wait to listen. So that's tonight. Oh, that's tonight.
Tonight at 7.
Tonight at 7. Okay, so this is going to actually air after. This will actually air the next day. So this is going to be
it'll air tonight. It's going to be live.
No, I know, but we're not live right now.
Oh, so I got you. I'm sorry.
Afterwards, so
right.
So you guys will be able to. I'll drop the link in so that you can go and watch. But there is going to be some shorts that I'll pull out of this so that people will know to go ahead and watch your podcast tonight. So that way that's out and open. So I highly recommend that everybody go listen live. If you are hearing this in time in the short, make sure that you do go live. Otherwise, it's going to be in the description below. And so you make sure you subscribe to the Hill of Justice podcast, and that's Hill of Justice. If you just mention at Hill of Justice, Victor will see that. And I'm going to share the link so that he can actually add this episode if he wants to his podcast page as a playlist or whatever he wants so that you guys can see it. It's going to be absolutely amazing because we are not going to let our justice system continue to be unjustly treating any of us. So, right, Victor?
Yes.
And for those of you who are in Georgia, in Clayton County, make sure that you please support Victor's campaign. We need good people like him in office. And we just need people, that have great voices. And we obviously know, Victor, they wanted to silence you. So there we go. It's kind of, these days it's almost an easy choice. They're almost making it too easy for us, right?
Exactly.
Jail, they're trying to silence you. So God bless you, Victor. I'm going to continue to talk to the audience for a second, make sure they know all kinds of stuff that you probably don't even care about.
Thanks for having me.
Until next week. Right? Okay. Hey, everybody, make sure that you remember to like, subscribe. Make sure that you go and follow Victor's channel. I'm also going to put the link to his book below. I don't have his book here handy with me because I have been reading it. It's called The Vigilant Sheriff. It is amazing. He also has the audio book that's in his voice. So you are going to want to make sure that you go on, that you listen to that, because it's like just a wealth of information. And as you can see, he's providing a wealth of information here on Patriots Perspective for us with the questions. If you have questions you want me to include in our next episode, or if you have, a title or any specific topic that you want us to cover, make sure that you just comment below. Make sure that you do mention us so that I'm alerted. You can also recommend a guest by going to patriotsperspective.com. There's a become a guest or recommend a guest. So you can do that. And, just let us know what guest you want to see next on Patriots Perspective. Listen, everybody, thank you very much for tuning in. Again, my name is Christi Tasker. You can find me on X. You can find me on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, all the social media platforms. They are also below, along with the Patriots Perspective. I try to keep everything separated. So you will find, my business information, my earring company, which I'm terrible at promoting when I'm on here. But anyway, I have like really great earrings on ChristiTasker.com. So thanks for going there. And then you can also support our journalism on PatriotsPerspective.com. And there's also GoFundMe, buy me a coffee, other links also below. Everybody, God bless you. Remember to do unto others as you would have others do unto you.
Remember, take action. Take action. Don't let big tech win. Share this video with a friend now. Most importantly, do unto others as you would have others do unto you.